Hello, everyone. Welcome to Court Chatter Live. I'm Kathy Russin from courtchatter.com, and I am excited for this week's show. Court Chatter Live is a show we do sometimes weekly, sometimes every other week, depending on my schedule, where we talk about the cases that we're covering on Court Chatter or that we're watching. It is the trials that are going on around the country, sometimes around the world, depending on what we've got going. And I usually just will give a rundown or a recap of what we have seen going on the last couple of weeks. But this week is special. We're not going to talk about what's going on right now, which for those of you that have been following, keeping track, we are currently watching the retrial of one of the Vanderbilt rape defendants, Corey Beatty, and I will talk about that in a future show, because tonight I have a special guest, and he is the jury foreman from the James VanCallis murder trial. The victim in that case was named April Millsap, and many of you will know this case as you followed it very closely, and we watched it. It was live streamed, and we watched that really sad, horrific case. I'll just quickly give a brief recap of it to refresh your memory, and those of you who will be watching this at a future date may have no idea what this case is about. So I'll give a quick breakdown of it. This was in a town called Armada, and Doug can tell me if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, Michigan. 14-year-old April Millsap was walking the family dog, Penny, and I'll show a picture of the dog, Penny, later on, because many of you got to actually love Penny, on a popular trail there, only about a mile from her home. And it's a popular trail where people rode bikes and jogged, and she went and took Penny for a walk. And she ended up murdered, and she was beaten and stomped to death. Stomped with somebody's foot, stomped to death. And the police arrested James, 34-year-old James VanCallis, for her murder. He went on trial, and he was convicted for her murder. This was an interesting case because they didn't have any physical evidence linking him to her. They had no proof that he ever even knew her. They had no proof that he went out to get her that day, that he was out to do this to anybody that day. They could never physically tie him to her, as far as none of his DNA, hair, blood, sweat, nothing was on her. They couldn't find anything of her on him or in his possessions or in his home or anything like that. So I think, or maybe thought, the jury would have a hard time with this case, and that's why I'm glad that we have who we have. And I'm going to bring him on right now. Here we have Doug Scott, and he was the jury foreman in this case. Hi, Doug. Welcome to Court Chatter Live.
Hello. Thank you.
I'm so glad that we have you here. And before I forget, I want to give credit where credit is due. The reason I have you on our show is one of our chatters, our regular chatters at Court Chatter. Courtchatter.com, for those that are not familiar, is a website where we live stream trials, and we have a chat room that people can chat while they're watching trials, and we become a like family there, and there's a community there. And one of our chatters, her nickname in the chat room is Delilah's Nana, and I know her by her real name, but she hooked me up with you. Turns out after the trial, of course not during, but after the trial, her daughter found out that you were the jury foreman. Of course, you couldn't say anything during the trial, but after the trial, she found out you were the jury foreman, and told her mom, who she knew was a trial junkie, and that's how she put you in contact with me. And you waited until actually after the sentencing. You wanted to wait till everything was done. His sentencing was last week, and then you contacted me, and I'm very grateful that you did. Because there is nothing that trial watchers love more but to get inside the head of a juror. We all want to be a fly on the wall inside of a jury room, because it fascinates us what goes on, because we all think we're jurors while we're watching a trial. And in that chat room, they're all trying to be jurors during the whole trial. And this is how we would decide a case. And as they're watching the state present their case, they have one opinion. And then sometimes when it's the defense turn, some people start changing their mind, and they kind of go through what maybe jurors go through a little bit. Now, granted, we tend to know a lot more than you guys will ever know because we get to see evidence that's not allowed in, and we get to hear arguments outside of the jury. So we tend to know a lot more, or we know about, past, their criminal past, things like that. So we do understand that we do know more than jurors know. So anyway, we're very glad that we have you here. I do have a lot of questions people have been submitting to me that we will get to later on in the show. I do want to start out, though, with asking you about the initial experience you had. Many of us will never, ever serve on a jury. Depending on where you live, where I live in Utah, and in my county specifically, it's just a low crime rate. And, I've been here since I was a little girl, and I've only ever had 2 jury summons, and have never, one was dismissed. They came to a plea agreement, and the second one I had vacation plans and just called the clerk, and she said, okay. So that's it. I don't even know if I'll ever even make it into a courthouse to get dismissed as a jury, let alone ever be on one. So then, not to mention a high-profile murder case. So I would like you to tell the viewers about the experience. You get a jury summons, you show up, those first couple of days, how it went, when you found out what this case was about. Just, take us inside your head. What was going through your mind?
Well, when I first got the summons in the mail, I tried to get out of it. I got a hold of the the court and said, please, I don't want to. I don't have time. I don't want to do it. And they said, no, this is your duty as a U.S. citizen to do this. So I said, okay, I'll do it. I figured it was going to be something very low profile, nothing like traffic court or something like that. In the morning when I was getting ready to go to court, there was news on TV, and it was the jury selection begins today at Macomb County Circuit Court for the James VanCallis April Millsap murder trial. And I thought, oh, great, I'm going to get stuck with this. Well, I went to the court, and there was just hundreds of people in the pool. Well, my number was selected, and I was dismissed about halfway through the day, and I received a text message saying your 1 day's worth of service will be, your check will be mailed to you. And I figured, oh, great, I'm done. I'm kicked. I'm out of here. Well, a couple hours later, I get another text message saying you're to report for jury duty the next day.
Oh my gosh.
So I went, and I actually got selected. And then the process started. All of the questioning, all of the questions that the prosecution and defense were asking, it was just overwhelming. They asked everything, right down to the type of TV shows you watch. Do you watch, like Forensic Files? Do you watch NCIS or Law and Order? And I was honest with them. I watch them on occasion, but nothing to an extreme. And figured someone would have an objection to me, probably the defense. It seemed like he was kicking more off than the prosecution was. And I went through everything, and the funny part was when the prosecution, we had like a little file we had to do. There was a questionnaire, and I don't even remember how many pages, 15, 18 pages. And it was all questions about, what we watch, what we do, where we go, were we involved with the April Millsap memorial? Did we hear about it? Have we been out to Armada? I answered everything honestly. And when the prosecution held up my little folder or brochure or whatever questionnaire, he said, if you'll notice, there's no little flags on this. He said, I have no problems with you serving on this jury. Well, then it went to the defense, and he said, I have no flags on mine either. He says, you're fine as a juror. So I wrote the thing out, and I was capped.
Okay, so let me ask you then. Armada is a small town. Well, first of all, let me ask you, are you from Armada?
No, I'm from Sterling Heights, which is south and west of Armada.
Okay, so how much had you heard about this case then before you got your jury summons?
I remembered being on the news that they found a 14-year-old that had been murdered off the trail. And I didn't even remember if they mentioned the trail or didn't. I just remember it back in my mind, but didn't think too much about it. Because that kind of news in the Metro Detroit area. You hear shootings and murders and all that all the time.
All right.
So it was part of the news, but it didn't stick out.
So that's actually why they liked you. That was one of the reasons why they liked you, because you hadn't been saturated with it, with the news from that. Okay, so that's interesting then. The next question people always have that have never served on a jury is about being able to take that much time off work. So I think, was it a 3-week trial? How long was this trial?
Just under a month.
Okay, and you don't have to tell us what you do, but what kind of line of work or industry are you in, or?
Automotive. I work at a car dealership. I sell replacement body parts.
So they probably didn't pay you, right? Your employer?
No, I did not get paid.
So that's a hardship, and you were able to do that?
It was tough, but I made it work.
Okay, so because we have seen sometimes jury selection processes of high-profile trials are live streamed. We've actually seen very few, but we've seen a few of those, and we've watched them. Actually, they're really kind of boring, but we have watched a few of those, and a lot of people get dismissed for financial hardship, that they cannot serve on a jury because they can't, their employer won't pay them, which, by the way, I understand with small employers that would be really hard, but you know, if it's your civic duty to serve on a jury, I think employers need to start paying their employees, because anyway. So, okay, well, we thank you for your service on this jury for sure. And I know that April Millsap's family and friends, I'm sure they thank you for this. All right, so let's get into the heart of the case then. I will talk a little bit more about it. It was July 24th, 2014 when this happened. So interestingly enough, they didn't really know anything about VanCallis at first. So some bikers came by on the trail and had seen a dog barking, and just a dog by itself, and were kind of hesitant to get near the dog. So it was just a barking dog that was off a leash by itself. So they kind of rode around him and went by the dog, and on their way back down saw the dog again and decided to take a closer look. And that's when they saw a foot, thought it was a mannequin, realized that it wasn't, and called 911, and that's how April was found. Oh, actually, Doug, you talked to me about this a little bit last night when we talked about the dog Penny. And as we talk about the dog Penny, I will just put up Penny's picture really quick for people to see, because people fell in love with Penny here. Oh, did that come up? That didn't come up. Where's Penny? Oh, right here. There's Penny. Tell the viewers what you said to me last night about Penny.
She's a very good, obedient, loving dog, because she would not leave April's side. She stayed there and kept barking until April was found.
She wouldn't leave her side. You know, she was off her leash, and but wouldn't leave April's side, and that is heartbreaking to think about that. It also makes you curious about what Penny was doing when April was being killed.
Well, I think she was probably barking a lot. She doesn't seem like the kind of dog that would be attacking, but making a lot of noise, trying to alert someone that something wrong was happening.
So I hate to get into the details, but a little bit was that April's shirt was, maybe you can help me with this. Her shirt was up and bra was off.
Yes.
And her skirt was pulled up and her underwear down, something like that.
She was pretty much naked from the original crime scene photos that were shown to the jury.
But she had not been sexually assaulted. He was convicted of attempted sexual assault, and the prosecution and police theory was that was his intent, which is the whole reason he ever approached her in the first place, but something interrupted him or stopped him. So either somebody came by the trail, or maybe Penny the dog. Maybe the dog became a problem. You know, who knows?
I think possibly because the dog was barking so much, and that's such a highly used trail, he was afraid that the dog was going to alert someone that was passing by, because there was quite a few people on the trail.
I mean, this is really a brazen crime. So we know from eyewitnesses, and we'll talk more about those as we get going here, that they saw many past April and saw a man talking to her. So there was more than one, there were several. So this trail was not empty that day. And he was planning to grab her, take her off the trail and sexually assault her. And she has a dog. So why would you ever attack anyone that's walking a dog? You don't know how that dog is going to respond. You don't know if that dog is going to attack you. This was just kind of a brazen act that doesn't, I don't know, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense, especially because it doesn't seem like this was pre-planned or very premeditated. I'm curious to know if you guys talked about that part in the jury room.
Yes, we've talked about that quite a bit, and everything that we could see, all the indicators that were brought up, it was just a spur of the moment thing, and it was ended up April was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
So horrifying for her mother. So you did talk about that. So did you guys kind of agree that it was probably Penny was the reason that he didn't ended up sexually assaulting her?
Yes. We felt that he was afraid the dog barking was going to alert too many people on the trail because he wasn't that far off of the trail. But it was a very heavily wooded area. You take half a dozen steps off the trail and you could probably have seen them.
Right. Okay, so we're going to kind of go all over the place with this case and kind of go back and forth. I'm not going to really go in chronological order because I like to get, as thoughts pop in my head, I like to get your thoughts on it. So here, this is the interesting part of this case for me. Well, there's lots of interesting parts of this case for me, but technology has changed the way cases are solved in our court system. It has changed not just DNA. We know how far that has come, but the technology, and we saw that in this case with the cell phones. And we see cell phone tracking go on all the time in cases, but this was a fitness app. And I have to pull this up and show people. I think I have this picture ready to go. Oh, you know what? Maybe I don't. I might find that as we're talking. So when April was walking Penny, she had on her cell phone a fitness app. And some of you may be familiar with these fitness apps. They'll track your mileage. So you can do it when you're biking, you can do it when you're walking, and it just tracks your footsteps. You know, the old pedometers we used to have, but this will track where you're going and your distance. Well, the investigators were able to use this app to track everywhere April went that night. Well, this also horrifically shows what was happening to her that evening, because it shows her walking the trail, and then when the attack happened to her, it shows her zigzagging, and the prosecution said that this is when she's being attacked. And what they don't know is if she has the phone on her at this time, or if VanCallis has the phone on him at this time. Did you guys talk about that part of it? I'm going to try and find that picture while you talk about this.
Actually, we did, and we thought that it probably wasn't him trying to catch her and her trying to evade him. We think that she was already down and out. He grabbed her phone, so in case she came to, she couldn't call or text or do anything, but he was trying to catch the dog. From that zigzag pattern, it almost looked like he was in possession of the phone and he was chasing the dog, trying to get it.
Oh, that's interesting. And he had the phone, but then was trying to chase the dog.
Correct.
Wow. See, this is why I'm so happy we have you. Okay, look at this, everyone. I think this should come up. Here is the diagram that they put together of the app. So this is April Millsap's, this is how they tracked her through her iPhone fitness app. and they track her on the trail, and you can kind of see from the very bottom right-hand corner and her walking, and then up at the top, and then coming back, and then all the zigzagging, and all the craziness that happens in there. And you can see the pinpoints of the body location, and all the craziness that happens in there. There were other pictures, and I didn't want to just bring up a whole bunch of different pictures that shows you know, when it happened, and I could have showed it more in detail, but this kind of grouped it all together. There shows that something went on right there, but now I like Doug's explanation of how you think all that zigzag happened, because we had a lot of discussion about that, right? I'm talking to the viewers now. When that was going on, we had a lot of discussion of what was happening on that zigzag. A lot of people thought she was trying to get away from him right then and there. But then that didn't make sense. And then but you think he had the phone and he's trying to get the dog.
Yeah, that's what we felt. We felt that she was hit with a motorcycle helmet while she was on the trail, and he dragged her off the trail because she had dirt marks on the backs of her heels and her shoes were off, where like if you would be dragging someone, it just popped the shoes off and her heels were dragged through the dirt. He got her off the path and then tried to catch the dog, because the dog was probably barking and he was probably going to do something to Penny.
Oh my goodness. So then what? So then he panics, realizes none of this is going to work, and just starts beating the crap out of her. And so for those of you that don't know, this is what the case that was put on against him was. He was riding a motorcycle on the trail that day and wearing a motorcycle helmet. And they say that she was beaten with that motorcycle helmet and stomped on with his foot, with his shoe. And Doug, you talked to me. See, we didn't see crime scene photos. They weren't shown to on the live stream, and they weren't shown to the gallery. They were only shown to you poor jurors. And that has to be the most horrific part about being a juror, is what you guys have to see and then never unsee your whole life. Tell me about that.
The one that bothers me the most is when they were doing the autopsy, the medical examiner picked up April's hand, and in her hand, she was clutching weeds and pieces of grass, like she was clawing at the ground trying to get away as he was dragging her off the path. That bothers me. That I have nightmares about it. I can't sleep over it. That is one of the worst things I have ever seen. Knowing that she was alive, trying to do everything she could to get away and couldn't do it.
That's awful. It's horrific. And there are some trials where we have seen crime scene photos, and there are viewers that can't get over that. It's just everyday people can't get over that. People that work in the industry, that's what they see all the time. But jurors are just everyday citizens taken off the street that don't want to do this stuff for a living, that are then shown that. And I've heard the stories. I know that that it haunts them for the rest of their lives. Some of those crime scene photos.
That's something I will never, as long as I live, get out of my mind.
Well, and especially a child. So that's awful, and I'm sorry that you had to see that. That's awful. Okay, so right before she's attacked at 6:28 p.m., she sends a text message to her boyfriend that says, "I think I almost got kidnapped. OMFG." Did you guys talk about that?
Oh yes, we talked an awful lot about that.
So tell me about that.
We were a little surprised that after texting that, she didn't try to stop someone on the trail or go with someone or run or just basically get away.
I would have hoped, I have teenagers, and I was just like, if you sometimes they feel stupid, right? Teenagers don't want to, look like they were scared or feel stupid or something, but it's like, oh, call your mom, you don't want to call police, or if you don't want to yell for help from strangers, dial my number and just be talking to me on the phone. If, I don't know. I don't want to second guess the poor girl, but she knew something just happened. And what was it? Was it that he had just been talking to her and then she felt so uncomfortable she was walking away at that point?
That's what it appears, yes.
Just awful. So part of the attack, part of the write-up that I was reading says attorneys indicated that the brutal nature of the attack, including footprint marks on April's upper chest and face. So those are the pictures you had to witness, that she actually had footprint marks on her face.
Yes.
Okay, so they find her. The bikers find her on the trail, and the police come, and they don't really know where to go from here. So they can't find any indication at the scene of who the attacker can be. And so police just start scouring the neighborhood. And almost 24 hours later, an officer is just going through neighborhoods, just driving through neighborhoods. They had interviewed eyewitnesses who said they saw her talking to a man on a motorcycle. So they knew that much. And they had a description of the motorcycle. So an officer is driving through neighborhood, and all of a sudden, he sees what looks like the description of this motorcycle parked in a driveway. So he stops. He gets out and walks up to it and walks around and takes a picture of it. And then they decide to go up and knock on the guy's door. And it turns out to be this guy named, I think it's James Muse, something like that.
Yes.
And he says, yeah, that's my friend, James VanCallis. That was his motorcycle. I think by the time they go back and talk to the guy, the motorcycle's gone. But he says, yeah, that was my friend James VanCallis, and that was his motorcycle. That's how James VanCallis gets on their radar. They would never know, right? Do you think, Doug, that they would have ever known if that cop hadn't have seen that motorcycle?
Had he have put that motorcycle to the side of the garage, out of the view of the officer that was driving by, on the back side of the garage, there never probably would have ever been a trial.
And it wasn't even his house. He was just visiting a friend's house.
Yes.
So if he hadn't have been visiting that friend's house, this is almost a day later, and or it was the next day, and
yes.
had the motorcycle out in front of that house, he would have gotten away with it to this day, because there was no physical evidence tying that to him. Unless he had slipped and confessed to somebody, he would have gotten away with that, but he had that there. And if that cop hadn't just been driving by and went, oh, that kind of looks like that motorcycle. I mean, it's almost like it was divine intervention that cop just all of a sudden sees that motorcycle there.
You should have seen the look on the officer's face when he was testifying. He had such a surprised look, saying, I was just driving by and I spotted it.
Yeah, I mean, amazing. So that's how James VanCallis gets on their radar. So they go to his house and question him. And he says, well, yeah, I was in the area yesterday, because he doesn't live in Armada. But he says, I was in the area yesterday because his brother lives in the area. And he says, first I went to, and he talks about that friend, James Muse. I went to his house, and then I went to my brother's house. My brother wasn't home. So then I went driving around on a motorcycle to find my brother. And then I went back to my brother's house. And then I left my brother's house just before it was getting dark, because a headlight doesn't work on a motorcycle. And I went back home. And he tells the police what he was wearing. And he said he was wearing this Carhartt hoodie and camouflage pants, and he said he was wearing K-Swiss tennis shoes. Right, Doug?
The famous shoes.
The tennis shoes. So let's not talk about the tennis shoes yet. So that's that. So they said he was very cooperative, and they left. And then a few hours later, another, I don't know, higher up detective or somebody calls him back and says, can we now get your statement in writing? And he becomes belligerent, and he becomes irritated, and he says they're harassing him, and his whole attitude changes. And now they're like, aha. But they don't really have anything. They can't really arrest him on anything or do anything with him. But 6 days later, they raid the place. James lives in this huge, weird house with his dad, his mom's boyfriend, James and his girlfriend and her kids, and they all live in this house where they have different parts of the house that they all live in. They raid the house and they're growing marijuana, right?
Yes, correct.
So they raid the house and arrest James and his father. And now this starts to become James VanCallis' downfall. Because what happens from that arrest is the media reports on it and puts his a photo on the news because they're reporting that this house gets raided with all this marijuana. And a lady from the trail that day says, that's the guy I saw on the motorcycle that was talking to that girl that got killed. That's how she IDs him, is from this pot arrest. Now, she had already given a sketch. Her and another woman, was it two women that gave a sketch or just one?
Two wanted to give sketches, but they only took one sketch.
So a sketch of the guy that they had seen on the trail had been out there for a while. But then a couple of different of these witnesses saw his picture on the news from this pot arrest, and they started calling in. Also, thousands of tips have been coming in anyway from April's murder. So they were fielding all these calls. But eventually, so this was in, it was July 24th. He wasn't charged with April's murder until October. So he's finally charged with her murder. Okay, so let's go back to the trial. I talked to you a little bit about this last night. I don't mean any disrespect. I know that April's mom may watch this at some point, and we have a lot of people watching right now from the Justice for April Millsap Facebook page. I'm very grateful that they're interested in this show. But this is what I do. I'm a trial reporter. I try very hard to go into cases that we cover with an open mind. I try to go in as a juror and say, the state needs to prove their case to me. A lot of times that's hard for me to kind of go in completely like that because I know more about the case than jurors do, or I've read all the documents, or I've seen pretrial hearings. In this case, I didn't know a whole lot about it. I'd seen a little bit about it, and I went into this with a really open mind, and I knew they didn't have any physical evidence tying them together, so I really wanted the state to prove the case to me. Also, as my chat room can attest to, I like to be the one to go in and argue the defense side because, 90% or whatever defendants are guilty when you go in, and cases are kind of cut and dry like that. But we do put innocent people behind bars. So we do need defense attorneys for that reason, and everybody needs representation. Trial watchers tend to be very pro-prosecution. I like to be the one to try and argue the defense side. So during this case, I did that. I tried to argue the defense side just to keep the chat room talking about this case. And I had some other people that were sort of arguing it too. Not that he was a likable guy, and not that we didn't feel absolutely horrified for April's mother and family and for what happened to that 14-year-old girl, but we want the state to be 100% sure, and we never want to put an innocent person behind bars, even if he's a creep. And this case was very circumstantial. So during the entire trial, I was always saying, but look, they can't prove it's him, but look, there's nothing saying that was him, but look, you can't for sure say that was the motorcycle. So I was always playing devil's advocate throughout this trial to get people talking about it. So here are parts of how the prosecution put this almost solely circumstantial case together. And then I want to pick at your brain as you were sitting in that jury box and these things were coming across. So one thing is the motorcycle, and here's where more technology comes into play. The killer takes April's phone after he kills her. So hello, another big mistake. Takes her phone, and now they can keep tracking her cell phone, and it starts moving very fast. And this is when prosecution said it's on the motorcycle with the killer, and it's moving very fast. So now they can track where the phone is going. Well, turns out a guy has a surveillance camera on the outside of his house, just in a neighborhood. And on the surveillance camera, you all can all of a sudden see a motorcycle go by that coincides with April's tracking of her phone. And this is more detective work. I'm going to bring you back up on the screen here, Doug. This is more detective work where the police start casing the neighborhoods where they know April's phone tracker is right? And
Correct.
the policeman happens to see above one guy's garage, that looks like a camera. Knock, knock, knock. And he asks the guy, is that camera working and can we see it, right?
Well, actually, what had happened was they did a door-to-door to every home in the city of Armada, every home and every business, and questioned every resident of the city and had a file on everyone.
Wow.
To see if anyone had seen anything. And the gentleman who's had the surveillance camera on his house said, well, I wasn't home, but here, you can take a look at my surveillance video because I have one that shoots out over my driveway. And sure enough, there was the motorcycle coming down one street, made a turn, went right in front of his house, made another turn, and went down the side of his house. So we actually had two different views of the motorcycle to see it.
All right, I am going to pull that picture up to show that how I could still argue this. How I was still, okay, let's see. I think it's this picture right here. Let me open this picture up. Oh, that's a horribly small one. Let me see if I have another one. This is how a live broadcast goes, people. Just 1 minute. I have a better one than this. All right, well, I might just have to show you the horribly small one for now. Okay, so this, oh, actually, I don't think you're going to be able to see this at all. I don't know. Can you see that at all?
Well, but yeah, you can see it.
Okay, so basically, and this is actually a picture of inside the courtroom because you can see the prosecutor's hand right there.
Yes.
Pointing to the screen where they're showing the witness. So that's all they could see. They could see what looks like a guy on a motorcycle passing in front of this guy's house. So you couldn't make out a lot, but you could see that, and they blew it up better than that, right?
Oh yes, we had very large photos of that.
Okay, so you could see a lot better. And did you take really good looks at that in the jury room?
Yes, everyone got on top of that picture, and we were like an inch away from it, just staring at the details of the picture from that surveillance video and the actual picture of the motorcycle.
Because the actual motorcycle, see, this is what is so, this is why I love actually what I do, because it's, you can do your own detective work here. And jurors have to do that. Jurors have to get into the room and do their own detective work, right? You guys have to figure this out because you have someone's life in your hands.
Exactly. And it was very nice. We had 12 very good people, and we were looking at that motorcycle, and everyone pointed out something different to look at that stuck out in their mind.
Okay, here's his actual motorcycle, right?
Yes.
So there's his actual motorcycle. And so you had that to compare to what was on that surveillance camera video.
Correct.
All right. Okay, so you could compare his actual motorcycle to what was caught on that surveillance video, which they know is the killer because it passed in front of that camera at the same time April's phone was tracked.
That is correct.
Passing on that street. And that's how the technology was able to come together and show that whoever's on that motorcycle is like 99% April's killer. Or whoever's on the motorcycle has April's phone, basically. Okay. So that's why I was saying how, this case probably, isn't solved in this, at least not in this manner 20 years ago. Because all of this technology didn't exist like this.
Right. You wouldn't have had the fitness app. You wouldn't have the surveillance cameras.
Right.
It probably, if this were 15, 20 years ago, he never would have went to prison.
Yeah, you know, it's really true. It's really, and it kind of works the opposite way too. We are seeing innocent people set free now because technology now is setting them free with DNA and stuff too. We see it work both ways. Okay. All right. Okay. So here's some other things, interesting things that happened. The girlfriend. So James VanCallis' girlfriend. The shoes. So I've gone back and forth now because I got onto the motorcycle. He tells them that he's wearing these K-Swiss shoes. Well, when they interview his girlfriend, she says, no, he always wears Nike Jordans. And she describes them to them. And he says, and she says he was wearing Nike Jordans that day. And they say, where are the Nike Jordans? And she says, they're gone. They're nowhere in this house. But when he came home that night, so news had broke, right? She sees the news break of this girl found dead on the trail, and she tells him later that night. And then she finds him at 2 a.m. in the kitchen cleaning the bottom of his Nike Jordan shoes with hand sanitizer. Right?
Yes.
This is what she testifies to.
And a sock.
This is what she testifies to. Let me put up, I'll put her up really quick because she was also a source of a lot of talk when we were watching this trial. Okay, here's Crystal. Her name's Crystal, and this was Jane VanCallis' girlfriend, whom they lived together. She's an ex-girlfriend now, and she had nothing but bad things to say about him, and he was an abuser, and he was controlling, and he controlled even when she was allowed to have water and go to the bathroom, and on and on and on. So she didn't have anything nice to say about James VanCallis. So she tells the cops that he has these Nike Jordans. He was cleaning them in the middle of the night, but they're gone now. And that we used to keep this shoebox up here above the fridge that had these like paperwork in it. But the paperwork I found the next day just on the desk, and the shoebox is gone. So now we're like, ooh, so he put the shoes in there and got rid of them that way. He claims that she's wrong and that he turned the K-Swiss over to the police and said, these are my shoes. But another fascinating part of this investigative work is they find a picture on his, I don't remember if it was on his Facebook or on his own phone camera, showing him wearing a picture of those Jordans, right?
He loved those shoes so much, he had multiple pictures of them on his cell phone.
I don't know if I think I had pulled up, oh, right, I do right here. Okay, so this isn't a great picture of him, but so they show this to you guys. And there's a picture of James VanCallis wearing these black and white Nike Jordans that he says he didn't have. Now, I can't remember. Did he say he didn't own them, or just that he wasn't wearing them then and he doesn't know where they are now?
That was it. He didn't know where they were at. He admitted to owning them, but didn't know where they were at.
All right. So then I guess it's not that big of a lie. That at least he owns them, but didn't know where they are. So the prosecution brought in a pair of new Nike Jordans to compare the shoe print to the prints on poor April, which I kind of didn't like that. So me being a person that wants them to prove things to me beyond a shadow, I thought that was a little bit of junk science, that you couldn't really compare. That wasn't his exact shoe. The tread would be different, it'd be worn and all that. But I'm just nitpicking at this point. What did you guys think about all of that with the shoe? The whole thing about the shoe. What did you guys talk about when you got in the jury room?
Well, what we were most interested in was the actual design of the tread pattern.
Okay.
The tread pattern from the shoes that they got matched exactly the tread pattern that was on April's face, her neck, and her chest.
Wow.
It was the same type of shoe, it was just a different color. So it was the same size, it had the same type of sole on it, and the pattern of the sole matched the marks on her body perfectly.
And you knew that he at least owned a pair of those shoes because of the pictures.
Correct.
So at least you could put those things together, that he at least at one time owned a pair of those shoes.
and he had them on when he was riding the motorcycle, because in the surveillance picture, you can see the shoes on the person riding the motorcycle.
Did you guys make that out in the surveillance picture?
Oh, yes, we did.
Aha! Oh, James VanCallis. Okay. All right, what else? What else talked about? Okay, so they never found the shoes. They never found the hoodie, right?
Correct.
And what else did you get rid of?
The dog's leash and collar, never been found.
Never found Penny's leash and collar.
No.
So, because he threw her backpack in one area and he threw her phone in another area, but they were able to find both those things. But they never found Penny's leash and collars. And that's interesting, because that means, I mean, that could either mean that he threw those somewhere completely different, or he ended up taking them home with him and then got rid of them with the shoes and the hoodie. Did you guys talk about that, or did that even matter?
Yeah, well, we talked about it because there was a special garbage pickup ordered for their home.
Right now in the chat room, I'm just glancing over there, and they're talking about the 16-bag pickup at that filthy, disgusting home.
Yes. And the
Talk about that.
police department actually went and dug up the landfill to find the bags of garbage, thinking they were going to find the Carhartt hoodie and the Nike shoes there. They were never found. I have my own theory on it. My theory is that they were probably wrapped up together, and right where the phone was found, there's a gravel pit in the area.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking they're probably at the bottom of the gravel pit.
That's interesting. So this might be a little hard to see. This is the backyard of the VanCallis home. Right? Yes.
The outside and inside of the house was simply disgusting.
It's like a ditch that runs kind of in the backyard of their house. And that is all garbage. Just garbage. And yet, he arranges for a special garbage pickup after this murder, where they take away 16 bags of garbage, which is an odd thing. Like, what else is he having them take away? That's 16 bags worth. I have no idea, when there's all of that stuff back there. But he arranges for a special garbage pickup. But you don't think that stuff was in there?
I don't. I think they were either burned in a fire, or they're at the bottom of the gravel pit.
Interesting. Go to the gravel pit. Go find them.
It's a big area, and there's a lot of water in it.
All right. Okay, so we have the missing clothing items. We have the missing leash and collar. I'm going to get to everyone's questions. They're sitting here questioning like crazy. What else did I want to talk about? Oh, just a kind of a side note. I don't know what you know about her, but what we know about her, the judge. Judge Mary. Do you know what her nickname is?
Scary Mary.
Did you know anything about her before?
Oh, yes.
Oh, so
she's elected in Macomb County.
So she has you know about her reputation.
Oh, yes.
So how did you feel about her being one of her jurors?
A little apprehensive at first, but she is really, really, really good to the jurors.
I love to hear that. So for those who don't know, I can't even pronounce her last name. What can you pronounce her last name?
Charnowski.
All right, Judge Mary Charnowski, but she really goes by Scary Mary, and I think she adopts that nickname. I think she's okay with it because it's from drug court, I believe, that she presides over. She's very, very tough on those defendants that come through there, and I'm okay with that. But she's scary, and she's a yeller, and she's tough on them. You can go to YouTube and just put in Judge Scary Mary, and you can see clips of her in action, and she is scary. And what you may not know is when you guys were out of the courtroom and she was dealing with attorneys and motions, she was scary. She went hard at VanCallis's attorney about, do you remember, you were at the sentencing, do you remember her bringing up when he brought up the payment for his expert witness? And she said, he's got to, okay, that came up during the trial when you guys were not in the courtroom. And he was there, the expert was there sitting at the defense table, and she wanted to know why he was there, and she's not paying him. She is not okaying funds for him to be there. And she was yelling at him. and yelling at VanCallis' attorney. And she's saying, I'm not paying him. Nobody's paying him. The taxpayers are not paying him. He's not doing anything here. He's not part of the defense. She was going to town on him. That was right in the middle of the trial. It was actually great. But so she has a reputation. And I wondered how she was. I actually, really, all judges are great with their juries. That's been my experience, is that juries in general have a great relationship with the judge. And so I assumed she was great with their jurors, but I didn't know if you guys were intimidated by her or not.
At first, yes, but after we seen the way she was treating the jury, it's like, wow, she's somebody you'd want to ask out and take to dinner or something. She's very
I love that. We did see her when court was on a break, she would handle some other cases. And so some defendants would come up before her. She would just handle some quick cases. And one time the stream stayed going and we saw her, and it was a guy that was behind on his child support, and she let him have it. And so we got a taste of that right during your trial, of her saying to him, do you think I just can't pay my bills? Do you think that I'm not allowed to take care of my responsibilities? And she was just going at him, and we were all cheering, go judge, go judge. And so it was, yeah. So I think she's a fantastic judge. I think she was fair, but I think she can be scary too. So I'm glad I'm never going to be in front of her as a defendant.
That's what I told her at the end of the sentencing. She came over and spoke with all of the jurors that had showed up. And she said, you know, she was just making small talk. And I said, boy, I'm really, really glad I'm on this side of you and not on the other side of you. And she kind of chuckled about it.
Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, so let's see. Did we get through the basis? Oh no, the basis of the case. We did. So you guys found him guilty, and I am going to talk more about your deliberations. Let me go through really quickly what he is. I've got it right here. He first-degree felony murder, first-degree premeditated murder, kidnapping, and attempted sexual assault. That was the charges, right?
Correct.
Okay, let's get to some questions. I have, let's see what we've got here. Okay, Adele. Adele, I told you when I was talking to you yesterday that it's not just here in the U.S., that we have people from all over the world that watch trials on Court Chatter, and that would be watching tonight. So Adele is from Canada, and okay, this is about the eyewitnesses, which actually we didn't talk a lot about the eyewitnesses, so I'm glad we're going back to this. In spite of the contradicting answers and descriptions of VanCallis by the husband-wife bike riding couple, did her testimony have a strong influence on making the decision on the verdict? For example, his eyes and his hair color in the sun, which had a reddish tint. Adele says she was pretty right on. So
well, it was really good for everyone that could identify that he was on the trail. They all said the same thing. They remember his eyes. And even when they took the composite picture, they just kind of zoomed in on the eyes and zoomed in on a picture of his eyes on an actual photo of him. It was a perfect match. They may not have had the hair correct or the shape of the face correct, but those eyes, it was there. It was perfectly there.
Okay, so that is what everybody said during the trial. So everybody talked about his eyes, because I have a hard time with eyewitness testimony. Most people that are in the legal field will tell you that. Most attorneys will tell you that it's the most unreliable testimony that you can have in a courtroom is eyewitness testimony, because you can line up 10 people who saw the exact same thing and they'll all describe it differently, because you don't know what at the time when you're seeing something that was an important thing, and then you've got to describe it a long time later, right? So people see things differently, and we kind of saw that in this trial. So sometimes jurors completely will disregard eyewitness testimony, and sometimes they just kind of pick and choose what they want out of it. And so that's interesting that you said the eyes, because that is another thing about James VanCallis that got him, that if he hadn't had these very descriptive, what I call bug eyes, that was another thing that nailed him, right?
Yes.
Was the eyes, because that's all they could see when his motorcycle helmet was on.
Yeah, it was all eyes. No matter who you spoke to that seen him, said his eyes, his eyes, his eyes.
And that brings me to my next question, which I thought was one of the greatest moments of the trial. And I'm not sure if you really know the significance of this. And I'll bring it up during the whole time we're going to talk about it, because everyone's going to know what I'm talking about when I bring this up right now. Was this. So this is what happens when you guys are out of the room. Okay, I can't remember if they first brought it up when you were in the room or not, but the state is saying the state's got VanCallis's helmet and is asking one of the eyewitnesses about it. And he says, yes, the guy that I saw on the motorcycle had a helmet just like that. Yes, that looks like the helmet. And yes, the visor was down, but I could see his eyes through it. Yes, I could see his eyes through it. And yes, that looks like the defendant. And the defense attorney does the dumbest thing ever and says, I want my client to put that on. Hey, it was like an O.J. Simpson moment, except it turns out very different for VanCallis.
Well, actually, they wanted the assistant that they were debating right. on the pay. They wanted him to put it on. You're right.
That's right. And then, okay, so you tell me. And then whose idea was it for VanCallis to put it on?
The prosecutor, Mr. Cataldo, he said, well, we have the defendant right here. It's his helmet. Have him put it on.
So they have you guys go out of the room, right?
Right, because he said, no, I'm not putting it on. And they said, okay, jury out, and we were gone.
So another reason you guys had to leave, they decided to have him put it on, but he stays at his table shackled. Did you guys know that?
No, I did not know that.
Okay, so he's shackled at his table, and that's 99% of defendants. They're shackled at the defense table, and jurors are not allowed to see that because that would unfairly prejudice you guys against defendants. But sometimes they're shackled with an ankle, shackled to the floor. I've seen that happen. But a lot of times they have their hands are shackled, or they're shackled with one to the desk. So he sat there shackled the whole time. But you guys aren't allowed to see that. So for him to demonstrate this, he had to be unshackled. So you guys had to be sent out of the room. Here, I can take this down right now. And he had, so he had to be unshackled. And then you guys came back in. But Scary Mary had a lot of stern words for him before you guys came in, because now he's unshackled. So they had a deputy stand even closer to him. And she said, you're going to be unshackled. But believe me, I don't know what she's, this isn't exact, of course, but she warned him and that he was only allowed to get so close. She told him how many feet he could get to the witness box, and that he was going to have extra security watching him and all this stuff. So, it's this moment that we never see in a courtroom. Never. You never see a defendant get up and do anything unless they're going to testify. They never do demonstrations ever. It's a dumb thing, because you don't want juries to see any more of a defendant than they have to. You really don't. You really just, the defense attorney just wants the attorney, to see. That's why most times defendants don't testify. You don't want jurors to have anything to do with the defendant. So it's really just a dumb bonehead move. And so they go and they have him put on his helmet. And so I'm curious what it was going through your guys' head, because as just everyday citizens, you guys probably don't know that this is not a weird thing to happen in a courtroom, or did you? What were you thinking at that moment?
I really didn't even think that much about it. I didn't even know he was shackled. I'm quite surprised. I know there was extra security when he was up and in front of us.
Yeah. But we were freaking out. We were like, oh my gosh, he's going to put the helmet on in front of the jury. This is crazy. We were, as longtime trial watchers, we thought this was a complete bonehead move on the defense's part to agree to this, because the whole time he said it wasn't him and that there's no way you could ID him through the helmet. And now this isn't something you practiced ahead of time. This is like an O.J. Simpson moment with the glove. And now you're going to have it happen in front of the jury. And this witness is going to probably say, yep, that's who I saw. Yep, that's what he looked like with the helmet on. And what happened? What happened when he put the helmet on?
Well, they were trying to get them at the same height that they were at.
I had that picture too. That was hilarious, actually.
It was ridiculous.
It was ridiculous.
And the witness just come back with the same thing. I remember his eyes.
They had because was it him at one time? Didn't VanCallis speak himself?
Yeah, he started to holler towards the judge because the chin strap on the motorcycle helmet was so tight.
Yeah.
It brought the chin bar up so you really couldn't see much of his face.
He said something like, I should know, I bought it that way. He said something.
Yeah, we really didn't hear it because it was directed towards the judge and his back was to the jury, but we knew he said something, and that's when his attorney told him, shut your mouth.
And I just thought, oh my gosh, now he's speaking in front of the jury, which is also a no-no. And it doesn't sound like kindness coming out of his mouth. The whole thing is just bad. It's just bad for a defendant to put anything but, look at me, I'm a super nice guy in front of a jury. You just don't do it. And I just thought this is such a horrible moment for the defense, but it was great for trial watching. I actually thought, as I sat there and watched that, I actually thought these jurors really don't have any idea what they're witnessing right now about how, attorneys and commentators and people that were tweeting this trial and reporters, they all understood that this does not happen. We watch these trials and report on these trials, and you don't ever see a defendant get up and demonstrate anything. Well, every once in a while, they'll say, "Can I get him to stand up and identify him as the person you saw it?" And you see that happen. And sometimes you'll get them to get up and demonstrate. If they're on the witness stand and testifying, then they'll get up and demonstrate something. But anyway, I just thought it was a very interesting moment in the trial. Okay, and by the way, I totally blew over Debbie, who goes in the chat room by I Forget Deb. That was actually her question. I had that question too, she said, I'm curious to know what the jurors thought of and she calls it the motorcycle helmet modeling. So that was her question. Okay, I have a question from Han, who is over in the UK. And she says, so let's actually get into this. We'll get into your deliberations. Which, if any, elements of evidence, I can't read my own handwriting, was turned out to be most difficult for the jury before finally coming to your verdict? So let's actually talk about the deliberations. So as many people know, and some people may not know, there you guys sit for almost a month on a jury, and you hear every day, and hear all this evidence. And sometimes you go to lunch together, and you sit on breaks together, and you do all these things together, and you can talk about your families and each other, or do whatever you want, but you're never allowed to speak a word about the case, not to your own families, not to each other, not to anybody. And now the case is over, and you're going to the deliberation room, and for the very first time you can talk. And walk us through. First of all, they have to select a foreman, and it's you. So let's talk about how that went.
Well, we had a bunch of the people did not want to be foreman. So it actually came down, we voted.
That's not a fun job.
No, we actually voted to see who was going to be foreman. It came down to myself and one other juror. And he said, I was on a federal case and I don't want to do this. So I said, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. I'll be more than glad to be foreman of the jury, because I was foreman on the jury the last time I served for jury duty about 7 years ago.
Oh.
So I knew the procedure. I knew what had to be done. Just it was on a grander scale now.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So do you take a vote right off the bat? What do you do?
Well, we wanted to review some of the evidence first. We wanted to make sure some of the things were very, very clear in our minds. So that's when we started asking for evidence. And we got the video, the surveillance video. We got the motorcycle helmet. We got the second pair, as I call it, second pair of shoes, but the ones that were like the ones that couldn't be found. And we're looking at those, and we're looking at the marks on April's face and neck and chest from the crime scene and autopsy photos, and comparing them to the shoe and the marks on her forehead from the marks from the ornamentation on the front of the motorcycle helmet. And we did all of that first before we even thought about taking a vote. Okay,
so I'm always interested. It works different. I found that it works differently with every trial. Sometimes they'll go right. We'll go right in and take a vote. see where you're at, and then start talking. And then other times you don't want to take a vote at all for a long time. So so before you tell us how it went down, did you take more than one vote during all this?
It was one vote for each count.
Okay. And then how far into deliberations were you when you took that one vote?
Oh, it was, we started on Friday, and I think our first vote was mid-morning on Monday.
And the total deliberation was 7 hours. Is that what you said?
Correct.
Okay. So, so you only took one vote, and we know that you ended up guilty on everything. So we know that part. While you guys were going over all the evidence and talking, was there anyone that ever had doubts that you picked up on?
If they did, they didn't address it or didn't show it.
Interesting. I thought this case was so circumstantial that somebody would say something. I mean, I know the totality of it is not. The totality of it, when it's all said and done, the guy's guilty. And actually, let me put myself up here so everyone can know. I probably should say that after I've said everything this whole show. I believe James VanCallis is guilty, and I believe he murdered April Millsap. And I believe that he did this horrific crime, and he got exactly what he deserved. And he's horrible. So I want to put that on the record. It's just that in these cases where there's nothing linking the guy directly to the victim, I like to see it all laid out. So when I was talking to you a little bit doing a pre-interview last night, I said that you guys are probably grateful you didn't have Kathy Russin, me, on the jury, because, you know, I would have talked it out. I would have been like, well, what about that? What about that? But you didn't have anyone like that was questioning any of it, really?
No, we had no one that even said anything in the negative, or I should say in his positive, that he was innocent. No one really said guilty until we voted.
Mm-hmm.
But there was no one saying, well, you know, it could have been a different motorcycle, or, you know, it could have been the case with shoes. Maybe he doesn't know where his shoes. Nothing like that ever come up.
Yeah, and I think that with all the viewers that I was involved with, even the ones that were like me that went back and forth and sat on the fence during some of the trial, by the end of the trial, everybody was pretty much on the guilty. It was like by the end you were just like, the defense had nothing. They couldn't put on a case. All they had was there's no physical evidence, so you can't prove it's him. You know, that's really all they could say. So I don't really think at the end anyone believed he was innocent except his family, I guess. One thing is, I talked just a little bit about it, but what were your feelings about the girlfriend? Did you believe everything she was saying on the stand?
No, I didn't. She seems like she's a very nice girl, but very confused, very mixed up. I could believe things like him cleaning his shoes in the middle of the night. But some of the other things I just kind of, you know, blew off. It was more the important things that she was saying.
I'm kind of glad to hear that, because I didn't believe her whole testimony. And so I had a hard time with how credible is she. What jurors are told, I can't remember if this was in your instruction or not, but generally what jurors are told is you can determine if a witness is credible. And if you determine that a witness is lying, then you can decide for yourself whether to throw out their entire testimony or to take what you decide is credible, go with that and throw everything else out. And for me, that's how Crystal was for me. I thought she was lying during parts of her testimony, and I thought she was outright lying. And then I thought she told the truth about some of that. And I hated that because I thought it might confuse you guys. Because I was just like, just tell the truth. Look, I know you hate the guy now, but just tell the truth, because the truth is he was cleaning his shoes in the middle of the night. You know, the truth is you probably did find some grass and hair. You know, the truth, those things are probably the truth. But did he control your every single move? You know, did he control when you could flush the toilet? You know, I don't know. I don't know that those things are true. So I'm glad to hear. Well, I guess we always know jurors are just made up of reasonable, everyday, common sense thinking people. And it sounds like that's what you did. You just threw out what you knew didn't actually really matter.
We didn't have I don't want to say very smart people. We had very smart people, but we didn't have, Einsteins in there. We had college graduates. We had everyday kind of people that knew what they were doing, that had common sense, and could pick through it and say, this is what I believe. This is what I'm not going to believe because it's a little too far-fetched. It's a made-up story. It's just not believable.
I just hate that because witnesses like that can hurt the case. It's just like, just get up there, tell the truth. You had some damning evidence on him. Just tell the truth. So anyway, okay, that was on Crystal. All right. We are well over the hour and people are begging me to stay on and keep you on because I need to get through questions. So I've got a bunch that are being sent to me by my moderators from the chat room, and I'm just going to start sending them out to you. I got to make sure they're not already. Okay, Chachi wanted to know your thoughts on Judge Mary, so I'm glad we got that covered. But I want to get the names out here to you. Oh, Lynn and I were on the same page here. Did it carry any weight with Doug when VanCallis showed his temper when he asked to put on the helmet? Well, I guess we didn't. I mean, you briefly just said that he said he wasn't going to put it on. What did you think when he said that?
Well, when they took us out of the courtroom, I was thinking to myself, I bet he's going to have it on when we come back. There he was.
I love that. Okay. Madison Sue says, where were her shoes found? Remember how April's shoes were off?
They were close to the body.
Okay.
But not on her feet.
Okay. Susan M., which I believe that in the chat room we know her as Fight, says, a comment. This was so sad. She was such a young and such a sweet, great girl. Yes, and I am going to put a picture of April up here in just a few minutes because we're not going to forget the victim. Lori also commented about when James put the helmet on, but she also wanted to just know in general, what did Doug think about James in court? Did you have just kind of an overall opinion about him?
What bothered me with him was the cold look on his face all the time. He never showed emotion for anything.
Yes, let me show you. I have this picture of him, and I think this kind of sums him up. This is how we experienced him in court. Right there.
Yeah, that's what I looked at for almost a full month.
Yep, and that shows the eyes too.
Yes.
Those are his eyes, and that is, that's what he looked like day in and day out. And he had no emotion about any of it.
No, he didn't even have any emotion when I read the verdict. He blinked, and that was it. He didn't move. He didn't flinch. He didn't shrug his shoulders, turn his head, nothing. He blinked, and that was it.
I remember I took a screenshot of his reaction and tweeted it out. Kathy Cannon said, April's mom spoke of a black truck. Isn't VanCallis's truck black?
Well, actually, there was some talk of a white truck. There was a white work van, and they did find the work van, and they questioned the driver of it, and he was looking for an address where he was scheduled to do some work.
Yeah, I remember they determined that was completely unrelated. Oh, you know what it was? It was April had been worried that I don't think this was brought into court, that a black truck had been following her a couple weeks before that.
No, I don't recall hearing anything about that.
That wasn't brought into court. I just got through reading that. Have to look into that. Okay. Lynn B., did the jury struggle with the fact that the witnesses only saw eyes? Well, I think you already commented that kind of was another check mark in the guilty column because his eyes were so unique, right?
Yes, everyone commented on his eyes.
Yeah. Lynn B., was VanCallis spray cleaning the shoes a strong piece of evidence?
Well, I wouldn't say a strong piece of evidence, but real suspicious.
Yeah.
Somebody gets up in the middle of the night to clean the soles of your shoes. There's something wrong.
And you believed that part of Crystal's testimony?
Yes, I did.
So she was believable on that?
Yes.
Because it's kind of a weird thing to lie about.
It is. And
sanitizer and a sock and...
Yeah, the hand sanitizer was wiped so clean there wasn't even fingerprints on it.
Yeah, yeah.
Very.
Oh, what? This is just from an anonymous person. Ask what you thought. Okay, ask Doug what he thought of Cataldo's closing, where he throws boxes and laughs at VanCallis. What did you think about the closing arguments?
I thought it was very compelling. He kept us really interested in it. No one was nodding off or anything. We were all just watching to see what he was going to do next.
So some people hate when there's theatrics in a courtroom. We see trials conduct. Every attorney is so different on how they do it, on how they conduct themselves in a courtroom, and actually judges are different on what they allow. But I love a theatrical performance in a courtroom. It's just good trial watching. So I may be bad or wrong in my thoughts of that, but to me it shows passion. I love it when a defense attorney does it, and actually most of my chatters hate that when defense attorneys do it, and they love it when prosecutors do it. So go figure. I love it because for me it shows passion for their client and trying to defend their client. I love it when prosecutors do it because they're trying to nail the guy and they have passion to get justice for the victim. Sometimes it's overboard and it's ridiculous, but I don't like the monotone and the boring and the whatever. Give me what you got. Show me what you got. So I liked it. I liked his closing myself.
I was quite surprised when the first box of paperwork went flying. Yeah. I was real interested right then.
You're like, oh, I might sit up for this one. Okay. Yeah. Cindy Fortin had the same comment. Prosecutor was very compassionate during closing. Lynn B says it must have interested Doug that some colored parts on the bike had been changed. Did you talk about that?
Yeah. When he first bought the bike, we have pictures of that. And then he actually changed the color scheme of the bike. We had a black fender on the front, a white fender on the back. The engine side cover was like a gray color. But
it hadn't been changed since the murder, right?
No, it was changed after he purchased it.
Right, okay. Oh, this is interesting. A comment on the gravel pit. In our chat room right now, watching the show, we have a person named Jean who lives in the area. And she says, I live on the old gravel pit. The sheriff had 2 divers out there dragging the bottom of the lake.
First I've heard of that.
Interesting. Okay. Oh, Ty B wants to know, so did the expert get paid? How can we find out? I'm sure you don't know anything about that.
Well, that is going to come up real soon because he has to appear in front of Scary Mary.
I wonder if I bet you we won't see it. I wonder if you'll find out. Do you think you'll
find out?
Well,
it'll probably in our local papers.
You might have to keep in contact with me about that.
Oh, definitely.
Okay, good. All right. Susan, who we also know as Fight. Oh, she's the one that said, please tell Kathy we need another half hour. All right. Chris says, Chris wants to know, Doug, how are you sleeping now? Hope your sleeping is improved.
It has a little bit, but on days when I think a lot about April, which I do quite often because I have nieces and one niece is right around April's age. It brings it all back again.
Oh, it's heartbreaking. This is a good question from Madison Sue. Could the jurors see him clearly through that visor when he put the helmet on?
Oh, yes. You could see the eyes.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Okay. Let's talk about this. The next question's about the sentencing. You were at the sentencing, right?
Yes.
So you attended the sentencing, and I find that happens a lot. How many jurors attended the sentencing?
We had 9 of the regular jurors and 1 alternate show up for the sentencing.
I find that happens a lot because you guys invest so much of yourselves in the trial that I find that happens a lot. So you went to the sentencing, and I'm going to read. I put some notes here about the sentencing. April's mom, Jennifer, was heartbreaking. Sentencing is always the hardest part for most of us that watch trials because of the victim impact statements. Jennifer's mom was the only one that spoke on behalf of the victim, and she said a lot of things, but she said to VanCallis, I hope when you close your eyes, you see only April over and over again. You, James, are a damn thief. You stole my beautiful daughter's life, and you stole the rest of mine. And this is what makes me really, really, really sad for her. She said at the end, I hate you and I can never forgive you. And you know, I haven't had a child murdered. And I'm sure actually this is how I would feel. But I would hope that at some point I could try and not feel this way. And I hope that for April's mom, that this can subside a little bit, because hating him forever is going to just tear her apart. So I hope at some point she gets some kind of relief from that. Makes my heart hurt for her. Then VanCallis, on the other hand, had a lot to say at his sentencing. I wanted to smack the guy. And that is actually one of the questions from, okay, Chachi said, Doug, did you watch the sentencing? And you did. And then I had a question from, I want to get their name out here. Oh, and this was also from Susan, known as Fight. She wanted to know what you thought. So this is what VanCallis says. Still proclaiming his innocent. So his attorney says, Judge, my client would like to address you before you sentence him. And he says, there's no evidence to show that I did anything wrong. There's nobody that can ID my motorcycle as being on the trail that day. And then I love this part. No witnesses that can positively ID me being on the trail that day. And he went on and on and on, saying that I don't even remember exactly. I think Susan said it in here. He challenged her right to sentence him, claimed that the photos of the body in the crime scene were different and had been staged. He just went on and on. So tell me what you were thinking sitting in the gallery.
Well, it's actually summed up in the local Macomb County newspaper, the Macomb Daily, was my comment afterward.
Oh,
Jury Foreman says the statements are garbage.
There you go. They were garbage. I don't think that he should even be allowed to speak.
It was just a babbling mess of nothing. If he wanted to contest his innocence, he needed to do it at the trial, not the sentencing. You're past the point of no return right then.
Yeah, I agree. And like Judge Mary said, that's for your appeal. This isn't the time for you to go on and on about this. Your trial's over, and you have an appeal. They always get to an appeal, and that's when you bring all that up. This isn't the time. I mean, I don't know how April's mom contains herself. I don't know how the family members of any victim contain themselves in a courtroom. I'd have come over the wall and punched him.
I have to give them all of the credit in the world for not lashing out. What he did was horrific. Absolutely horrific.
Having to sit there after you've murdered my daughter and listen to him still say, look, I don't think he said I'm innocent. I may be wrong, but I don't think he said I didn't do it. I think he said, you have nothing on me. Nobody can positively ID me. No one can prove it was my motorcycle. I think that's what he was saying. Kit says that the expert has until, I think, April 25th is when the expert's got to come to Judge Mary, which is my birthday, by the way. How fair is that?
Wow.
So okay, I think we're going to wrap it up. If we don't have anything else, let me check the chat room out. Boy, I think we have kept you long enough. We have done this for an hour and a half, but I might have one more. Oh, yeah, Jean says that VanCallis commented during his rant that no one could say what I was wearing. That's really all he concentrated on. Not that I didn't do it, but no one can prove that I did it.
He never said he was innocent. He just kept coming over the part of no one can positively say it was me.
Right. That's my whole point. He's not like, I didn't do this. I'm really sorry that this happened to her, but it wasn't me. He really didn't say all that. Susan has one final comment, which is how I would like to wrap this up, which this is the best live show yet, Kathy. Thank you. And please thank Doug. And I do want to thank you so much for doing this. the viewers put a lot, you put way more into this, but they put a lot of their time into watching this case and all the trials they watch day in and day out, day in and day out. And then the verdict and sentencing comes, and then we kind of move on to our next one, and we don't ever get this part of it. We don't get this part of it where we get to get inside the jury box, which is what we all really want to do. We want to know what happened and what you guys thought and what went on in the jury room. And I really, really appreciate you doing this. Want to thank you again, and you and I will keep in touch. We'll find out what happens with that expert.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Doug. And I will wrap it up. I do want to say that Doug has given me permission to give out his information in case anybody else wants to get a hold of him. As you can see, he's a great guest. If you want to talk to him or interview him, his name is Doug Scott, and you can contact him via email. And it is Mopar, M-O-P-A-R, Doug, D-O-U-G-E, 1956 @gmail.com.
No E, just D-O-U-G.
What did I say? M-O-P-A-R-D-O-U-G 1956 @gmail.com. You can contact me at Kathy@courtchatter.com if I just gave out the wrong info and you can't get a hold of him. And I can tell you how to get a hold of him. He's a great guest and he's a great interviewee. And I want to thank you all for joining me on another edition of Court Chatter Live. I'm Kathy Russin from courtchatter.com, and we will see you next time.